Millionaire bought 4 5-year-old twin girls sold by their uncle and changes their lives forever. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where in the world you're tuning in from. Enjoy the journey. 3 years after losing Rebecca to cancer, Charles Wagner moved through the charity gala like a ghost in an expensive suit. The champagne in his hand remained untouched, his smile never reaching his eyes. At 42, the tech billionaire had everything money could buy, except what mattered most. "Mr. Wagner, so glad you could make it." The event coordinator's voice was too bright, too loud. "Rebecca's foundation is being honored tonight." Charles nodded, throat tight. She would have appreciated it. He drifted away from the glittering crowd, seeking a moment's peace. The hallway behind the ballroom offered escape, until urgent voices caught his attention. "50,000 is my final offer. They're damaged goods anyway." Charles froze. Something in the man's tone made his skin crawl. "Look at them. Identical merchandise, barely used, worth twice that." "Merchandise?" Charles moved closer to the partially open door, peering inside. What he saw stopped his heart. 4 little girls stood in a row, holding hands like a paper chain. All identical, quadruplets, no more than 5 years old, with blonde hair and haunted blue eyes. They wore matching worn white dresses, their small shoulders rigid with fear. The tallest girl, perhaps by mere millimeters, stood slightly forward, her gaze defiant despite her trembling lips. Something about her eyes struck Charles like lightning. They were Rebecca's eyes. Not in color, but in spirit. Fierce, protective, refusing to surrender. "Let me examine the goods," the buyer said, reaching for the girls. The uncle, Charles, assumed from their similar features, roughly separated them, breaking their chain of hands. "Display value, stand straight." The smallest girl whimpered, and the defiant one immediately tried to reach her sister. "Stay put." The uncle's hand raised threateningly. Something cracked inside Charles's chest, a wall of ice that had surrounded his heart since Rebecca's death. "That's enough." His voice cut through the room as he stepped inside. Both men turned, startled by the intrusion. "This is a private transaction," the uncle snarled. Charles pulled out his checkbook, a relic he kept for rare occasions. $250,000. The men's eyes widened. "For what?" the uncle finally asked. Not for what, for whom. Charles stepped closer to the girls, noting their matching stuffed rabbits clutched in tiny fists. "I'm not buying children, I'm giving them a chance." The defiant girl's eyes narrowed, measuring him. She didn't trust him. Why should she? But there was a flicker of something else there too. Hope, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred broken soul. "Do we have a deal?" Charles asked, his pen hovering over the check. The uncle's greed won over any hesitation. "Cash would be better." "This isn't negotiable." Charles's voice was steel. "The check, or I call the authorities. Your choice." As the uncle grudgingly agreed, Charles caught the eye of the protective little girl again. Something passed between them, a promise unspoken but binding. "I will not let you down." As Charles signed the hastily prepared adoption papers, a silver-haired woman appeared in the doorway. She wore an elegant navy suit and carried herself with quiet authority. "Dr. Eleanor Reed." She introduced herself, handing Charles a business card. "I can handle the legal aspects of this situation." Charles didn't question her timely appearance, his focus entirely on the 4 silent little girls now sitting in a tight cluster on the leather back seat of his Bentley. Their identical stuffed rabbits remained clutched to their chests, a barrier between them and the world. "Thank you," he said simply to Dr. Reed, accepting her card without examining it. The drive to his Westchester mansion passed in silence. Each time Charles glanced in the rearview mirror, 8 solemn eyes stared back, assessing him. "We're here," he announced unnecessarily as the car crunched up the circular driveway. His sprawling home suddenly seemed alien to him, a showpiece designed for entertaining business associates, not nurturing children. There were no safety gates on the marble stairs, no plastic cups in his crystal-stocked kitchen, no small shoes by the door. I have 4 guest rooms prepared, his housekeeper Mrs. Chen whispered, clearly startled but professionally adapting to the new arrivals. The girls refused to be separated. When Charles showed them their individual rooms, they simply stood in the hallway, hands linked, until he relented. You can stay together tonight, he conceded. They climbed onto one queen-sized bed in the largest guest room, forming a protective knot of small limbs and blonde hair, still in their worn dresses because Charles realized, with a stab of inadequacy, that he had no children's pajamas. After Mrs. Chen left for the night, Charles sat outside their bedroom door, listening. The house had never felt so quiet yet so full of presence. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. It took him several minutes to recognize the pattern. The girls were communicating through their bedroom wall. Soft whispers followed, too quiet to decipher, but clearly part of an established system developed through necessity. His phone buzzed, a text from his CFO. Nguyen deal closing tomorrow, need signature by 9 a.m. Charles stared at the message, remembering Rebecca's final days. The hospital machines beeping, her hand in his, growing lighter by the hour. Promise me something, she had whispered, her voice barely audible. Anything. Find a way to love again. Charlie, don't let your heart die with me. He had nodded, not believing it possible. Now hearing the small taps of tiny knuckles on the wall, a secret language of 4 little survivors, something shifted inside him. He typed a reply. Cancel, all meetings indefinitely. Something more important has come up. Morning came with panic as Charles realized he had no idea how to care for children. No children's food, no proper clothes, nothing they would need. He found them already awake, sitting in perfect symmetry on the bed, watching him with those matching blue eyes. I'm Charles, he said awkwardly. You'll be staying with me now. The defiant girl, he still didn't know their names, spoke first. I'm Emma. This is Olivia, Sophia, and Ava. She pointed to each sister in turn, though Charles couldn't detect any differences between them. We stay together, Emma added firmly. Always. It wasn't a request. Yes, Charles agreed, feeling strangely like he was the one being interviewed. Always, I promise. A tiny portion of tension left Emma's shoulders, and Charles recognized it for what it was, the first fragile thread of trust. He had no idea what he was doing, but he knew with absolute certainty that he couldn't let these girls down, not when they had already lost so much. We'll figure this out together, he said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. Charles burned the toast. Again. I'm sorry, he told the 4 identical faces watching him from the kitchen. Island, 3 days into parenthood, and he felt more incompetent by the hour. Emma simply took the charred bread and divided it equally among her sisters, scraping off the worst of the blackened parts. Do you like eggs? Charles tried, desperate to provide something edible. 4 solemn nods. During bath time, disaster struck again when Ava's eyes filled with tears as shampoo trickled down her forehead. It stings, she whispered, the first words she'd spoken directly to him. Charles panicked, not knowing how to comfort her without overstepping boundaries. I'm so sorry. I should have bought the no tears kind. The doorbell interrupted his fumbling. Apology. A courier stood outside with 4 enormous boxes. Delivery for the Wagner household, the man announced cheerfully. Inside the boxes, Charles found children's clothes in various sizes, toys, books, hair accessories, and proper toiletries, including tear-free shampoo. Everything was practical, rather than extravagant, exactly what the girls needed. A handwritten note sat atop the first box. Children need consistency more than luxury. Here's a start. The handwriting matched the elegant script on Dr. Reed's business card. Later that evening, after finally getting the girls settled with their new pajamas and teddy bears, each slightly different so they could choose their favorites, Charles researched Dr. Eleanor Reed. Her online presence was minimal, just a simple website for a children's trauma foundation. No social media, no press interviews, barely even a photograph. When he called to thank her, her voice was warm but professional. How did you know what they needed? Charles asked. And how did you know where to find me at that auction? I recognize something in you, Mr. Wagner, she replied, sidestepping his question. The desire to heal by helping others heal. I have no idea what I'm doing, he admitted. Few parents do, even those with 9 months to prepare. I'm not their parent, aren't you? The question hung between them. I can provide professional guidance, she offered, but the real work must be yours. During their video call the next day, Charles noticed a photograph on her desk, a much younger Eleanor with a man who looked strikingly like Charles's late father. The resemblance was uncanny. That photo behind you, Charles started. Dr. Reed casually adjusted her camera angle, moving the photograph out of frame. Let's focus on the girl's immediate needs. For the next hour, she outlined trauma-informed care principles, sleeping arrangements, and education options. Her expertise was evident, but Charles couldn't shake the feeling there was more to her involvement than professional interest. Why are you helping us? He asked directly. Her expression softened. Because those girls deserve a chance, and so do you, Mr. Wagner. That night, Charles sat in his study, Rebecca's photograph beside him. What have I gotten myself into, Becca? He whispered. 4 little faces appeared in the doorway, a silent row of matching blue eyes and blonde hair. They had developed a habit of moving together, synchronized as if connected by invisible strings. Can't sleep? He asked gently. Sophia, the third in their usual lineup, stepped forward slightly. Your picture is sad. Charles looked at Rebecca's smiling face. Yes, I suppose it is. Our pictures got burned, Emma stated matter-of-factly. In the fire. Charles's head snapped up. What fire? But the girls had already retreated, disappearing back into the hallway like woodland creatures startled by a sudden noise. He found them back in bed, pretending to be asleep. Their eyelids fluttered with the effort of deception. Sitting at the edge of the bed, Charles made a silent vow. He would earn their trust, uncover their past, and somehow, though he had no idea how, give them a future. As he closed their door, his phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. They'll need consistency tomorrow. Same breakfast, same routine. ER. Charles stared at the message. How did she know the girls had just revealed something about their past? And how did she get his private number? The mystery of Dr. Eleanor Reed was deepening by the day. 2 weeks into their new arrangement, Charles had established a routine with almost comical awkwardness. His multi-billion-dollar company now ran largely without him, as he focused on mastering the complexities of children's breakfast preferences and the precise art of detangling hair without tears. Olivia likes her toast cut in triangles, not squares, Emma informed him one morning, her protective instincts never wavering. And Sophia needs her milk in the blue cup, not the green one. Charles adjusted accordingly, noting each preference in the leather journal he now carried everywhere. The CEO who once commanded boardrooms was being educated by 5-year-olds. Slowly, he began to recognize each girl's distinct personality, despite their identical appearance. Emma was the protector, always vigilant, always first to speak. She carried the weight of responsibility for her sisters with solemn determination. Olivia lived half in dreams, her gaze often drifting to the windows. When given crayons, she created swirling, vibrant worlds that seemed impossible from such small hands. Sophia counted everything obsessively. Steps between rooms, blueberries on her plate, stars on her bedspread. Numbers seemed to give her comfort. In a world that had proven unpredictable, Ava was the emotional barometer, absorbing everyone's feelings. When Charles felt overwhelmed, Ava would appear silently at his side, her small hand slipping into his as if offering support rather than seeking it. The breakthrough came during a violent thunderstorm that rattled the mansion's windows. Charles found Ava hiding under her bed, trembling with each lightning flash. The thunder won't hurt you, he promised, but his words had no effect. In a moment of inspiration, he gathered every blanket and pillow he could find and constructed an elaborate fort in the living room. He worked silently, aware of 8 curious eyes watching from the doorway. This, he announced, is an official thunder-proof fortress. He crawled inside the blanket structure and opened his worn copy of The Wizard of Oz. Rebecca had loved reading it aloud, doing different voices for each character. One by one, the girls entered the fort, arranging themselves around him in their usual formation. As he read about Dorothy's house being swept away by the cyclone, Olivia spoke directly, to him for the first time. "We're like Dorothy," she whispered. "Our home flew away." Charles's throat tightened. "Sometimes," he managed, "you find a new home in unexpected places." Olivia studied him with those serious blue eyes. "Is this our home now?" 4 identical faces turned to him, waiting. "If you want it to be," Charles replied carefully. "I would like that very much." Emma's expression remained guarded, but she didn't contradict him. From her, this was progress. They fell asleep there, huddled together in the blanket fort as the storm raged. Outside, when Mrs. Chen arrived in the morning, she found all 5 of them still asleep, Charles's arm protectively around the girls. She took a photo before waking them, wordlessly handing Charles his phone later with the image displayed. Charles stared at the picture, hardly recognizing himself. The perpetually polished businessman was rumpled and soft in sleep, his expression peaceful in a way it hadn't been since Rebecca's death. That afternoon, Dr. Reed arrived for her weekly visit. She watched the girls in the garden, noting how they still moved as a unit yet were developing individual interests. Sophia arranging stones in perfect geometric patterns, Olivia collecting flowers, Emma testing the sturdiness of the swing set, and Ava trailing her fingers through the fountain water. "They're adapting," she observed. "And so are you." Charles showed her the photo from that morning. "You're becoming a family," she said simply. "Is that possible? After everything they've lost?" Dr. Reed's expression softened with something like personal understanding. "Family isn't only what you're born into, Mr. Wagner. Sometimes it's what you build from the broken pieces." As she left, Charles noticed a silver charm bracelet on her wrist. One charm caught his eye, a small, unique honeybee identical to the one his mother had worn until her death. The mystery deepened, but now Charles had more immediate concerns. 4 little girls were gradually claiming pieces of his heart, and for the first time in 3 years he didn't want to take it back. Charles jolted awake to screams echoing through the mansion. His heart pounding, he sprinted down the hallway, toward the girls' room. Sophia sat bolt upright in bed, her small body rigid with terror, mouth open in a sustained wail. Her sisters surrounded her, Emma trying to shake her awake while Olivia and Ava watched with wide, frightened eyes. "Sophia," Charles called gently, kneeling beside the bed. "You're safe. It's just a nightmare." Her screams subsided into broken sobs. "The closet," she whimpered. "Don't put us back in the closet." Charles froze. "What closet, sweetheart?" Emma shot him a warning look, but Sophia was too distraught to filter her words. "When we cried, he locked us in there," she hiccuped. "No light, no food until we stopped making noise." White-hot anger flashed through Charles. "Who did?" "Uncle," Ava whispered, the word barely audible. "After Mommy and Daddy went to heaven," Sophia continued, rocking slightly, "he sold Bunny." Her voice cracked, said toys were for good girls. Charles struggled to keep his expression neutral despite the rage building inside him. The uncle had sold their belongings, cherished toys of grieving children, for alcohol money. "I need to make a call," he told Emma, whose watchful gaze hadn't left his face. "Will you stay with your sisters?" She nodded, already pulling Sophia back into their protective circle. In the hallway, Charles called Dr. Reed, not caring that it was 3 a.m. She answered immediately. "What happened?" No surprise at the hour, no sleepy confusion, as if she'd been waiting for his call. Sophia had a nightmare about being locked in a closet by their uncle. Dr. Reed's voice turned clinical, guiding him through trauma response techniques, explaining how to create safety. Children with trauma need control over their environment, predictability, transparency. By morning, Charles had made a decision. He waited until the girls had finished breakfast, then led them to the hallway closet nearest their bedroom. "Watch," he said, picking up a sledgehammer he'd retrieved from the gardening shed. With one powerful swing, he smashed the closet door, splintering the wood. 4 identical gasps harmonized behind him. "In this house," Charles declared, surveying his handiwork, "nothing will ever be locked again." He spent the day removing every interior door lock, replacing them with simple magnetic catches. The girls followed him from room to room, wide-eyed and silent. That evening, as he tucked them in, Charles took a risk. "I have nightmares too sometimes." 4 pairs of eyes stared back, waiting. "About losing Rebecca, my wife." He swallowed hard. "About being too late to say goodbye." "Did she go to heaven too?" Olivia asked softly. Charles nodded. 3 years ago, cancer, an illness, took her. Did it hurt? Sophia's question was barely audible. "Yes," Charles answered honestly, "but she was very brave." A long silence followed, broken finally by Emma. She slid out of bed and approached him, pulling something from inside her stuffed rabbit, a tattered photograph of a smiling couple holding 4 identical infant girls. "Can you keep this safe?" she asked, her voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Will he take it away if he finds us?" Charles understood the monumental trust in this gesture. Emma was entrusting him with their most precious possession, the only image they had of their parents. "No one will ever take anything from you again," he promised, carefully accepting the photo. "I'll guard it with my life." That night, instead of sitting outside their door, Charles settled into the armchair in the corner of their room. He watched over them until they fell asleep, thinking about closets and locks and the cruelty adults could inflict on children. He texted his head of security, "I need everything you can find on the girl's uncle," discreetly. Dr. Reed's reply came minutes later, though he hadn't messaged her. "Be careful digging into the past. Some doors once opened cannot be closed." Charles stared at his phone. How did she always seem to know what he was thinking? Tomorrow, he decided, he would demand answers about Dr. Eleanor Reed's connection to his family. But tonight, he would simply keep watch over 4 small survivors who had, despite all odds, found their way to him. As he dozed off in the chair, Charles could have sworn he heard Rebecca's voice whisper, "You're finding your way back to life, Charlie. One broken piece at a time." The weather forecast called it the storm of the decade. Charles watched through the kitchen window as dark clouds gathered, heavy with the promise of snow. The first flakes were already falling, delicate and deceptive in their gentleness. "Will the sky fall?" Ava asked, pressing her small palm against the cold glass. "No, sweetheart. It's just snow," Charles assured her, though the meteorologist's urgent warnings had him concerned. By afternoon, the gentle snowfall had transformed into a howling blizzard. Wind rattled the windows as if trying to force entry, and the temperature plummeted. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. "It's okay," Charles said to 4 wide-eyed faces illuminated only by the dim winter light filtering through the windows. "The backup generator will start automatically." But it didn't. Charles had always delegated such problems to staff, his building manager, his assistant, his head of maintenance. Now, with the roads impassable and his cell phone showing no service, he alone was responsible for 4 frightened children in a rapidly cooling mansion. "Stay here," he told the girls, wrapping them in blankets on the sofa. "I'll check the generator." The storm's fury hit him full force as he stepped outside. Snow whipped against his face, the wind cutting through his inadequate indoor clothing. The generator shed stood 100 yards from the main house, a distance that now seemed like miles. By the time he reached it, his fingers were numb. The generator had power but wouldn't start, some technical failure beyond his expertise. Returning to the house, Charles found the temperature dropping noticeably. Night was falling, and with it, any remaining heat would soon dissipate. "We need to conserve warmth," he announced, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. "We'll all stay in one room tonight." He gathered blankets, pillows, flashlights, and food, creating a nest in front of the living room fireplace, the one heating source that didn't require electricity. "Have you ever made s'mores?" he asked, pulling chocolate bars and marshmallows from the pantry. 4 heads shook in unison. "Then you're in for a treat." Charles showed them how to roast marshmallows on the fire, sandwiching the gooey sweetness between graham crackers and chocolate. The simple activity distracted them from the storm's rage outside, their giggles a counterpoint to the wind's howl. As they ate their messy creations, Charles told stories by flashlight, making shadow puppets on the wall. For a few precious hours, the storm became background noise to their improvised indoor camping adventure. But at midnight, disaster struck. Olivia developed a fever, her small body radiating alarming heat. "My throat hurts," she whimpered, curled against Emma. Charles had no children's medicine in the house. The nearest hospital was 15 miles away. "We need to get her to a doctor," he told Emma, who nodded solemnly, understanding the gravity of the situation. Bundling all 4 girls in layers of clothing, Charles carried Olivia to the garage, while the others followed in perfect formation. His least ostentatious vehicle, a 4-wheel drive SUV, offered their best chance through the snowdrifts. The journey was harrowing. Roads had disappeared under snow, visibility reduced to mere feet ahead. Charles drove with painful slowness, hyper-aware of his precious cargo. In the emergency room, a nurse mistook him for the girl's grandfather, and Ava's clear voice corrected her. "He's our dad now." Charles's head snapped up at the words. Dad. The title hung in the air between them, unchallenged by any of the sisters. While doctors examined Olivia, diagnosing strep throat, thankfully treatable with antibiotics, Charles sat in the waiting room with the other 3 girls. Emma, normally so independent, held his hand the entire night. "You came back for us," she said suddenly, breaking hours of silence. Charles looked at her, confused. "From the generator shed?" She shook her head. "Everyone else goes away. But you came back." Understanding dawned. In her 5 short years, Emma had experienced too many abandonments. "I will always come back," Charles promised, his voice thick with emotion. "Always." As dawn broke, the storm subsided. They returned home to a house where power had been restored, everything functioning as if no crisis had occurred. But something fundamental had changed. Charles had faced the storm not as the billionaire who could buy his way out of problems, but as the only protector 4 small children had in the world, and they had called him Dad. Spring arrived, bringing with it a household transformed. 3 months had passed since the night of the auction, and as the gardens around Charles's mansion burst into bloom, so too did the personalities of 4 remarkable little girls. Emma's scientific curiosity emerged first. Charles found her dismantling his expensive alarm clock one morning, tiny screws arranged in perfect rows beside her. "I wanted to see the inside," she explained, not a trace of apology in her voice. Rather than scolding her, Charles brought her a box of old electronics from his company's research lab. "These are meant to be taken apart," he explained, showing her how to use the miniature screwdriver set he'd bought her. Her eyes lit up with a passion he recognized, the same drive that had led him to build his first computer at age 12. Olivia's gift revealed itself through color and form. Her artwork transcended typical children's scribbles, capturing emotions she couldn't yet verbalize. A particularly haunting drawing showed 4 small figures huddled together in darkness, with a larger shadowy figure looming above them. "It's from before," she whispered when Charles asked about it. "Before you," her eyes seemed to say. Charles hung her creations in his study, each one a window into their past and present. Sophia's mathematical abilities surfaced during a trip to the grocery store. As Charles struggled to calculate the sale price of breakfast cereal, her small voice offered, "It's $12.73 for all of them." Charles double-checked with the calculator on his phone. She was exactly right. "How did you know that?" he asked, amazed. She shrugged. "Numbers are easy. They don't change like people do." But perhaps most remarkable was Ava's gift, an almost supernatural empathy that allowed her to sense emotions before they were expressed. "Mrs. Chen is sad today," she announced one morning before the housekeeper arrived. "Her sister is sick." When Mrs. Chen arrived, red-eyed but professional as always, Charles discreetly asked about her family. Her surprise was evident. She hadn't told anyone about her sister's hospital admission the previous night. "How did you know?" she asked. Charles glanced at Ava, who was carefully arranging flowers in a small vase. A lucky guess. Recognizing their unique talents, Charles converted his home office into a learning space tailored to each girl's interests. One corner held engineering kits and microscopes for Emma. Another featured easels and art supplies for Olivia. A third contained mathematical puzzles and games for Sophia. The fourth offered books about emotions and relationships for Ava, Dr. Reed observed their progress during her monthly visits, noting how they still moved as a unit yet were developing as individuals. "They're not just surviving now," she remarked during one visit. "They're becoming who they were meant to be." Charles nodded, watching Emma and Sophia collaborate on building a simple robot. "I barely recognize the company financials anymore," he admitted. "I've been so focused here." "Regrets?" Dr. Reed asked, her keen eyes studying his face. "None," Charles answered without hesitation. "The board can handle quarterly projections. These moments won't come again." Later that evening, as Charles helped Ava plant seeds in small pots on the windowsill, his phone buzzed with a message from his CFO. Urgent decision needed on Malaysian expansion. 6 months ago, such a message would have sent him immediately to his office. Now he simply typed back, "Proceed with Plan B, we'll review tomorrow." Ava looked up from her seeds. "You're happy now," she said. Not a question, but an observation. Charles considered this. "Yes," he realized. "I am. But also sad sometimes," she added, gently patting soil around a tiny seedling. He smiled at her perceptiveness. "That's how hearts work, Ava. They can hold joy and sorrow at the same time." She nodded sagely as if confirming something she'd long suspected. "Like our box." "What box?" Ava pointed to her chest. "The one inside. It has Mommy and Daddy, but also has room for you." "Now." Charles knelt beside her, overwhelmed by the simple profundity of her words. "I'm honored to be in your box," he said softly. That night, checking on them after bedtime, Charles found all 4 girls still awake, whispering together in their secret language. They fell silent when he appeared, but Emma spoke after a moment. "We decided something." "Oh?" Charles leaned against the doorframe, prepared for anything. "If it's okay," she said formally, "we'd like to call you Dad." "You're sure about this?" Charles asked, kneeling to straighten Emma's collar. All 4 girls wore identical navy uniforms, hair neatly braided, backpacks carefully labeled. "We're not babies, Dad," Emma replied, using his new title with a blend of shyness and pride. Brookhaven Academy was the most prestigious private school in the county, and the only one Charles had found with experience handling multiple births in the same classroom. The headmistress had assured him they would balance the girls' need for togetherness with opportunities for individual growth. Still, he hesitated by the car. "Remember, if anything feels wrong, just call me. I'll come immediately." "We'll be fine," Emma insisted, though Ava's hand tightened visibly around her stuffed rabbit. Charles watched them walk into the imposing brick building, 4 identical blonde heads moving in formation. His heart constricted with a mix of pride and fear he'd never experienced in business dealings. Dr. Reed called as he sat in the parking lot, unable to leave. "The first day is harder on parents than children," she said, somehow knowing exactly where he was. "I'm not worried," Charles lied. "Of course you are, that's what good fathers do." The word father still felt foreign to Charles, a title he'd inherited rather than earned. Yet the girls had bestowed it upon him with such certainty, his fears proved prescient. When he returned for pickup, Miss Winters, their teacher, requested a private conversation. There were incidents, she said diplomatically. The incidents included other children's curiosity turning cruel. Some asked if the girls were bought like dolls. Others found their synchronized movements strange. When Sophia was locked in a bathroom stall by older students as a prank, she'd had a full panic attack. Perhaps a less traditional environment, Miss Winters suggested gently. Charles controlled his anger, thanking her for the information while inwardly seething. In the car, he apologized to the girls for the difficult day. "Can we stay home with you?" Olivia asked, her voice small. Charles nearly agreed immediately, but Dr. Reed's advice about involving the girls in decisions stopped him. "Let's discuss this as a family," he said instead. "You all have a voice in this decision." That evening, he held their first formal family meeting, complete with cookies and apple juice. Each girl took turns sharing her experience. "The library has books about electronics," Emma admitted reluctantly, "and Miss Winters said I could join the science club." "I liked art time," Olivia said. "The teacher didn't laugh at my painting." "They have a math competition," Sophia added, her eyes lighting up despite her bathroom ordeal. Only Ava remained silent, studying her sisters' faces. "What do you think, Ava?" Charles asked gently. "Everyone wants to try again," she said, reading her sisters' underlying emotions. "Even though they're scared." Charles looked at Emma for confirmation. As the unofficial leader, her opinion carried weight. "We should stay," Emma decided after a moment. "But together. Always together." The next morning, Charles met with the headmistress, making his expectations crystal clear. By the end of the week, an anti-bullying assembly had been held, and staff received additional training on trauma-sensitive education. Surprisingly, the quadruplets began to thrive. Their unique bond and fierce loyalty to each other became strengths rather than oddities. When a new student was ostracized for his thick accent, the girls adopted him into their circle with the simple explanation, "We know what it's like to be different." Within a month, they had developed a reputation for kindness and mutual protection. Emma organized a friendship brigade that paired lonely children together at recess. Olivia started a mural project that allowed students to add their own unique contributions. Sophia tutored struggling math students. Ava became the unofficial mediator of playground disputes. When Charles was called back to the school, he expected problems. Instead, the headmistress handed him 4 perfect attendance certificates and artwork from children who had benefited from the Friendship Brigade. "We underestimated them," she admitted. "And you." That evening, helping the girls with homework, Charles marveled at their resilience. Despite everything they'd endured, they had found ways to help others heal. "Why aren't you working on your computer tonight?" Sophia asked, noticing his laptop remained closed. Charles realized he hadn't checked company emails all day. Strangely, he felt no anxiety about this, only certainty that he was exactly where he needed to be. "Some things are more important than business," he told her, helping Ava sound out a difficult word. "Like family?" Sophia asked. Charles nodded, watching these 4 remarkable children who had somehow become his world. Exactly like family. The envelope arrived without a return address, its contents brief and chilling. "How much did you pay for those children, Wagner? The authorities might be interested." Charles stared at the typewritten note, his blood running cold. 6 months of building a new life, and now this. A threat from the shadows. More notes followed over the next week, each questioning his fitness as a guardian, suggesting improprieties in the adoption. Charles increased security at the mansion and school, careful not to alarm the girls while ensuring their protection. In his study, Charles spread out every document related to the night he'd found the girls. The hastily signed papers, Dr. Reed's business card, receipts from that evening, all scraps of a transaction that had changed 5 lives forever. Legally, his position was precarious. The adoption had been unorthodox at best, possibly criminal at worst. Though Dr. Reed had subsequently helped file proper paperwork, questions remained about the original circumstances. His private investigator's report confirmed his worst fears. The girl's uncle was challenging the adoption, claiming, Charles had stolen the children. He's demanding compensation, his lawyer explained during a confidential call. More accurately, he wants more money. He sold his nieces, Charles growled, like property. Unfortunately, proving that without appearing complicit in human trafficking is problematic. Charles hired additional investigators to dig deeper into the uncle's history. They uncovered a pattern of neglect and substance abuse following the deaths of the girl's parents in a car accident. Child services had been involved briefly, but the case had mysteriously disappeared from their records. More disturbing was how much Dr. Reed seemed to know about the situation. During her weekly visit, she mentioned details about the uncle's recent movements that weren't in any reports Charles had received. After ensuring the girls were asleep that night, Charles confronted her in his study. "Who are you really, Dr. Reed?" he demanded. "And why are you involved in our lives?" Eleanor's composure never wavered. "I wondered when you'd finally ask directly. No more riddles. The girls are being threatened. I need the truth." She studied him, as if measuring his readiness for what she was about to reveal. "I was their mother's therapist." Charles blinked, momentarily speechless. "Their mothers?" "Caroline Foster was my patient for 2 years before her death. She was concerned about her brother's influence on her husband, about their financial entanglements." Dr. Reed's professional demeanor softened slightly. "After the accident, I tried to monitor the girls, but their uncle moved them frequently. By the time I located them, he was already arranging their sale. So the auction, you orchestrated my presence there? I needed someone with both resources and a heart that understood loss." Her eyes met his directly. "You weren't random, Mr. Wagner." Charles felt the floor shift beneath him. "You manipulated me. I created an opportunity. You chose to act on it." She removed an envelope from her bag. "Caroline feared something might happen to her and her husband. She left this with me." Inside was a handwritten letter, its contents simple but devastating. The girl's mother had suspected her brother of sabotaging their car before the fatal accident. There was no proof, only a mother's desperate concern for her children's safety should her fears prove justified. "Why didn't you go to the police?" Charles demanded. "With what? Suspicions? The brother is well connected locally." Dr. Reed's voice hardened. "I tried the proper channels. Meanwhile, 4 traumatized little girls were being neglected and abused." Charles absorbed this, anger giving way to understanding. "What happens now? He's threatening to expose the irregular adoption." "Let him try," Dr. Reed said with surprising steel. "I've been building a case against him for over a year. Your investigators have simply accelerated the process." Charles studied the woman before him, a child psychologist who had gone to extraordinary lengths to protect 4 orphaned girls. "There's more you're not telling me," he said finally. A flicker of something crossed her face. Approval, perhaps. "Yes, but some truths need to wait for the right moment." She gathered her belongings. "Focus on the present threat, Mr. Wagner. Keep the girls safe while I handle their uncle." "We handle him together," Charles corrected. "No more operating independently." "They're my daughters now." Dr. Reed nodded, a subtle smile appearing. "So they are. And that, Mr. Wagner, is exactly why I chose you." After she left, Charles checked on the girls one final time. They slept peacefully, unaware of the storm gathering around them. He silently renewed his promise to protect them, regardless of what it might cost him. Tomorrow would bring calls to his legal team and security experts. But tonight, watching 4 small chests rise and fall in the dim nightlight, Charles understood with perfect clarity that there was nothing he wouldn't do to keep them safe. "Tell me about the car," Dr. Reed said gently. The weekly therapy sessions had become routine, but today was different. Today, they were finally addressing the accident directly. The girls sat in their usual formation on the playroom floor. Emma tensed visibly at the question, while Sophia began counting carpet fibers, a self-soothing behavior she reverted to under stress. "We don't talk about that day," Emma stated firmly, her protective instinct flaring. Dr. Reed nodded. "I understand." But sometimes the memories we try hardest to lock away are the ones that hurt us most from inside. Charles watched from the doorway, his presence requested but unobtrusive. 7 months into their new life together, the girls were flourishing in most ways, but they still woke with nightmares they refused to describe. "It was raining," Ava said suddenly, her voice so soft Charles had to lean forward to hear. "Mommy kept looking back at us." Emma shot her a warning look, but Ava continued, her empathic gift seemingly compelling her to release the burden they'd all carried. Daddy was driving fast. He looked scared. Her small fingers twisted in her dress. There was a loud noise. Then spinning. Olivia began to cry silently, tears tracking down her cheeks. Sophia's counting grew more frantic. "You don't have to continue," Dr. Reed assured Ava. But the little girl shook her head. "We were all in the car. The glass broke. Mommy turned around all the way and said, 'Take care of each other.' Then she closed her eyes." Emma moved to Ava's side, putting an arm around her. "That's enough," she insisted. But Ava had crossed a threshold. "We weren't hurt. Just small cuts. We sat there for a long time before the lights and sirens came. We kept waiting for Mommy and Daddy to wake up." Charles felt his heart breaking for them. No wonder they refused to be separated. Why they developed their own language, why they checked on each other throughout the night. Their mother's final instruction, take care of each other, had become their sacred mission. Dr. Reed kept her voice steady. "Thank you for sharing that, Ava. That was very brave." "And are they watching us from heaven?" Sophia asked abruptly. Her counting paused. Dr. Reed glanced at Charles, who stepped fully into the room, kneeling beside the girls. "I believe they are," he said. "Just like Rebecca watches over us too." Emma studied him intently. "You really think so?" "I do." Charles took a deep breath. "And I have something to show you. I've been working on it for a while." He led them through the house and out to a secluded part of the garden he'd kept off limits during construction. There in a sunlit clearing stood 4 young cherry trees planted in a perfect circle around a small central fountain. "One tree for each of you," Charles explained, growing stronger together. The girls moved forward slowly, touching the smooth bark of the saplings with wonder. "In the spring, they'll bloom with pink flowers," Charles continued, "and as you grow, they'll grow alongside you." "What's the fountain for?" Sophia asked, always attentive to patterns and design. "It's a memorial fountain," Charles explained. "A place to remember those we've lost, but also to celebrate life continuing." Emma, who had maintained her composure throughout Ava's revelation, suddenly broke. Her small shoulders began to shake, and for the first time since Charles had known her, she wept openly. Not the silent tears the girls sometimes shed, but deep, racking sobs of grief too long contained. Charles gathered her into his arms, and the other girls pressed close, their family unit expanding to include him in their circle of comfort. "Can we put pictures of Mom and Dad here?" Emma asked through her tears, her face pressed against his shoulder. "Of course," Charles answered, his own voice thick with emotion. "And Rebecca, too. They're all watching over us." Later, as the girls helped plant flowers around the trees, Dr. Reed stood beside Charles. "This was the breakthrough we needed," she said quietly. "They're finally processing their grief instead of just surviving it." Charles nodded, watching as Olivia carefully arranged stones in a decorative pattern around her tree. "Will the nightmares stop now?" "Not immediately, but they'll change, become less terrifying." Dr. Reed smiled gently. "They're learning it's safe to remember, safe to feel the pain." "Because they're not alone anymore," Charles realized. "None of you are," Dr. Reed agreed, her gaze encompassing all 5 of them. That night, for the first time, the girls asked to hear stories about Rebecca. Charles shared memories of her laugh, her kindness, her strength during her illness. The conversation opened a door that had been closed in his heart for 3 years. As he tucked them in, Emma whispered, "Thank you for the trees, Dad. Dad." The word still amazed him every time he heard it. "You're welcome, my brave girl," he whispered back, knowing something profound had shifted that day. Within the girls, within himself, within their still-forming family. They were learning, all of them, how to honor the past while building a future together. The courthouse loomed imposingly against the clear autumn sky. Charles adjusted Emma's collar, a nervous gesture he couldn't suppress. "Remember what we practiced," he told the girls. "You only have to answer what the judge asks you." "We know, Dad," Emma replied with the composed maturity that still sometimes startled him. Inside, they were met by their attorney and Dr. Reed. Charles had spared no expense hiring the most respected family court specialist in the state. What he hadn't expected was to see the girl's uncle already seated at the opposite table, alongside an expensively dressed lawyer. "That's him," Sophia whispered, pressing closer to Charles's side. The uncle, Martin Foster, looked different from Charles's memory of that night. Sober, well-groomed, and affecting a sorrowful expression that might have been convincing to someone who hadn't seen him haggling over his niece's price. "Steady," Dr. Reed murmured. "We're prepared for this." The proceedings began with formal introductions. Judge Harriet Wilson, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, studied the four identical girls with keen interest before addressing the court. "This is an unusual case," she stated. "I've reviewed the preliminary documents and find significant irregularities in the initial transfer of guardianship." Martin Foster's attorney rose smoothly. "My client was coerced into signing away his rights to his beloved nieces. Mr. Wagner used his considerable wealth and influence to essentially purchase these children in a moment of my client's financial distress." Charles felt sick, hearing the transaction twisted into something even more sordid than it had been. His own attorney responded with clinical precision, outlining the documented neglect and Martin's repeated attempts to monetize his guardianship. "Furthermore," she continued, "the children have expressed clear preferences about their placement." Judge Wilson nodded. "I will speak with the children privately." In her chambers, the girls sat in perfect alignment, hands clasped in their laps. Charles waited anxiously outside, unable to hear their testimony. Later, he would learn that Judge Wilson had lost her own parents at a young age and been adopted after significant trauma. Perhaps this explained her particular attentiveness to the girls' whispered accounts of closets and hunger and fear. When court reconvened, Charles took the stand, aware that everything hung on his testimony. He spoke not of his resources or credentials, but of nighttime rituals and favorite breakfast foods. He described Emma's passion for dismantling appliances, Olivia's evocative artwork, Sophia's mathematical brilliance, and Ava's extraordinary empathy. "They've taught me to live again," he concluded, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "We're healing together." The turning point came unexpectedly when Martin's lawyer abruptly requested a recess, only to return and withdraw from the case entirely. Charles learned later that Dr. Reed had anonymously provided evidence of Martin's earlier attempts to sell the children to other interested parties. Outside the courthouse, a reporter thrust a microphone toward Charles. "What makes you qualified to raise these girls?" she demanded. Before he could answer, Sophia stepped forward. "He loves us," she said simply. "That's the only qualification." Judge Wilson granted full legal adoption that day. As they left the courthouse, Charles carrying an exhausted Ava while the other girls clutched his coat, he caught sight of Dr. Reed watching them with unmistakable satisfaction. "Thank you," he mouthed over the girls' heads. She merely nodded, as if to say this outcome had been inevitable from the start. The adoption celebration filled the mansion with laughter and music. Charles had invited the girls' teachers, Mrs. Chen and her family, and a few trusted colleagues who had supported them through the journey. The quadruplets moved through the party in colorful dresses they had selected themselves. Similar, but not identical, a small but significant evolution in their self-expression. They accepted congratulations with shy smiles, still most comfortable in each other's company, but gradually opening to the wider world. Charles searched the gathering for Dr. Reed, finally spotting her silver hair through the French doors. She stood alone in Rebecca's art studio, which Charles had preserved exactly as his late wife had left it, paintbrushes still in cups, half-finished canvas on the easel. "You've never come in here before," he observed, joining her. Eleanor traced, her fingers lightly over a photograph on the wall, Rebecca in college laughing in front of a campus building. I've been respecting boundaries. Charles studied her carefully. But you've seen this room before, haven't you? A slight smile. You've finally put the pieces together. Not all of them. Charles closed the studio door behind him, but enough to know you and Rebecca weren't strangers. Eleanor nodded, turning to face him fully. We were childhood friends, inseparable through high school, roommates in college. She gestured to the photograph. I took this picture. But you lost touch, Charles prompted. Life took us in different directions. Me to psychology, her to art, and then to you. Eleanor's expression softened with memory. We reconnected briefly during her illness. Understanding dawned. She asked you to watch over me. She knew how deeply you would grieve, how you might lose yourself. Eleanor moved to the window, looking out at the party. I kept tabs on you after she died, recognized your deepening depression. When I encountered the foster girls through my trauma work, I saw an opportunity. You orchestrated my presence at that gala, Charles said, recalling their earlier conversation. I created a possibility, she corrected. You chose to step through that door yourself. Charles processed this revelation with less anger than he might have expected. You manipulated me. I honored a promise to a dying friend. Eleanor met his gaze directly. Rebecca asked me to help you find purpose again. But everything that followed, your devotion to the girls, the family you've built, that was all you, Charles. The use of his first name registered his shift. From client to something else, family perhaps. Why not tell me from the beginning? Would you have believed a convenient coincidence that your late wife's friend happened to place 4 traumatized orphans in your path? She shook her head. You needed to forge your own connection with them, not adopt them out of obligation to Rebecca's memory. Charles looked through the window, at his daughters now playing a complicated hand-clapping game with other children. They saved me too, didn't they? That's how healing works, Eleanor said simply. It's rarely one-directional. A knock interrupted them as Emma peeked around the door. Dad, we're doing the cake now. Be right there, sweetheart. As Emma disappeared, Charles turned back to Eleanor. So what now? Do you disappear? Mission accomplished? Only if you want. Me too. Her professional demeanor briefly faltered, revealing genuine attachment to the family she'd helped create. I've become rather fond of all of you. Charles considered this, then smiled. The girls would miss their Dr. Reed. And you? I think, Charles said carefully, that Rebecca would want her oldest friend to stay in our lives. Eleanor nodded, emotion briefly clouding her usually composed features. I think so too. Together they rejoined the celebration, watching as 5 once broken lives continued their remarkable journey of healing. Together. 1 year to the day after the auction, Charles straightened Ava's collar in the courthouse hallway. All 6 of them, Charles, Eleanor, and the quadruplets, were dressed in their finest clothes for the occasion. Are you nervous? He asked, noting Ava's solemn expression. She shook her head. It just feels important. It is important, Charles agreed. Today makes it official. They were gathered for the final adoption hearing, the formal proceeding that would legally change the girl's surname to Wagner. The girls had requested this themselves, insisting on keeping their original first names, but taking Charles's last name so everyone knows we belong together. Judge Wilson welcomed them warmly, a stark contrast to the tension of their previous court appearance. The proceedings were brief but meaningful. Each girl stated her full name for the record, then her new name with the Wagner surname. Emma. Catherine Foster, now Emma Catherine Wagner. Olivia Grace Foster, now Olivia Grace Wagner. Sophia Claire Foster, now Sophia Claire Wagner. Ava Michelle Foster, now Ava Michelle Wagner. As the judge signed the finalized paperwork, she looked directly at the girls. You are fortunate to have found each other, she told them. Sometimes families are born and sometimes they're built. Both kinds are real and precious. Later that evening, as twilight softened the edges of the garden, Charles gathered his daughters beneath the cherry trees which had grown noticeably during the past year. "I have something for each of you," he said, presenting 4 small velvet boxes. Inside, each was a silver locket, delicately engraved with the girl's initial. When opened, each locket contained 3 photographs. Their birth parents, Rebecca, and a recent family portrait of all 6 of them, Charles, the quadruplets, and Eleanor, who had become a constant in their lives. "These are your roots," Charles explained, helping Sophia fasten her necklace. "All the people who love you, past and present." Olivia traced the tiny faces with her finger. "Will we forget them, Mommy and Daddy?" "No," Charles assured her. "That's why I'm giving you these, and why we'll continue to talk about them just as we talk about Rebecca." Emma, ever the most guarded with her emotions, asked quietly, "Are you okay with us remembering them?" Charles knelt before her. "My darling girl, I would never want to replace your parents. They gave me the greatest gift possible, you 4. I will honor their memory always." "Like a promise?" Sophia asked. "Exactly like a promise." Charles looked at each of them in turn. "I will honor your past while we build our future. You will always know where you came from and be secure in where you're going." Eleanor, watching from a respectful distance, caught his eye with an approving nod. That night, a remarkable thing happened. For the first time since coming to live with Charles, the girls chose to sleep in their own rooms. 4 adjacent bedrooms they had helped decorate to reflect their individual personalities. The synchronized movement and constant togetherness that had characterized their early months had gradually evolved into a more confident independence. Charles checked on each of them during the night, a habit he couldn't bring himself to break. In each room he found a sleeping child with her locket clutched in one hand and her stuffed animal in the other, half in the past, half in the present, wholly secure in being loved. In the hallway he paused outside the last door, reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past year. From broken widower to father of 4, from isolated griever to head of a vibrant, unconventional family. "We did it, Becca," he whispered to the quiet house. "We found a way to love again." Somewhere in the garden, a night bird called to its mate, a sound of connection across the darkness that seemed to Charles's ears like an answer. 3 years after the night of the auction, the Wagner household buzzed with activity. At 8 years old, the quadruplets remained identical in appearance, but had blossomed into distinctly different individuals with unique passions. Charles sat in the audience of the state science fair, watching Emma present her water purification system to a panel of impressed judges. Her project combined engineering principles with environmental consciousness, a portable filter that could make contaminated water drinkable using readily available materials. "My birth father was an environmental engineer," she explained to the judges with quiet confidence. "His work inspired this design." Charles felt his chest tighten with emotion. Emma had researched her biological father's career, incorporating his legacy into her own emerging identity. The integration of past and present that Charles had hoped for was happening naturally. Emma won first place, accepting the blue ribbon, with a gracious smile that reminded Charles how much she had changed from the fiercely protective, distrustful child he'd first met. Across town, Olivia's artwork hung in the children's wing of the hospital, where Eleanor volunteered. Her colorful murals transformed sterile hallways into underwater adventures and forest journeys, giving young patients windows into other worlds during difficult treatments. "Can you paint more fish?" a 7-year-old leukemia patient asked as Olivia worked on her latest piece. "As many as you want," she promised, adding whimsical details based on the child's suggestions. The shy, dreamy girl who once expressed her traumas through dark imagery now created healing spaces for others, her artistic gift becoming a bridge between her inner world and the outside one. Sophia's mathematical brilliance had found expression in an educational app developed through Charles's tech company. Number Quest had started as a series of games she invented to help classmates understand fractions, then evolved into a widely used teaching tool when Charles recognized its potential. "The secret is making the numbers tell a story," Sophia explained during a demonstration for elementary school teachers. When you understand the pattern, you understand the math. The algorithms she intuited with her remarkable mind were now helping thousands of children overcome math anxiety. The girl who had once counted obsessively to control her fear now empowered others to find joy in numbers. Perhaps most remarkable was Ava's transformation. Her extraordinary empathy, once a burden that absorbed everyone's emotions indiscriminately, had evolved into a gift she could channel purposefully. She had started a support group for children who had lost parents, creating a safe space where grief could be expressed without judgment. It's okay to feel sad and happy at the same time, she told a recently orphaned 6-year-old boy. That's how hearts work. Charles recognized his own words, spoken to her years ago in the garden, now offered as wisdom to another child navigating loss. His own life had transformed as well. Stepping back from daily operations at his company, Charles had established the Wagner Foundation for Traumatized Children, with Eleanor as its director. Their combined resources and expertise created innovative programs supporting children through various forms of trauma, influenced directly by what they had learned from the quadruplets. At the Foundation's annual gala, the girls gave a joint speech about second chances that left no dry eye in the audience. They stood together at the podium, still moving with their characteristic synchronicity at significant moments, but speaking with individual voices about their journey. Family isn't just what you're born into, Emma concluded. Sometimes it's what finds you when you need it most. Watching from the side of the stage, Charles remembered the frightened girls from 3 years ago, holding hands in a protective chain, their matching stuffed rabbits clutched against worn dresses. Now they stood confidently in elegant, coordinated outfits they had chosen themselves, addressing hundreds of people with poise beyond their years. Later that evening, as Charles tucked them in, a ritual they still maintained, despite their increasing independence, Sophia asked, "Are you proud of us, Dad?" "More than I could ever express," he answered honestly. "Even though we're not really yours?" She persisted, a rare moment of vulnerability revealing the question that occasionally still troubled them. Charles sat on the edge of her bed. "You became mine the moment I chose you, and you chose me back. Biology doesn't make a family. Love does." Sophia nodded, satisfied with this answer. "Like our trees in the garden. Different roots, same soil." "Exactly." Charles smiled, touching the locket around her neck. "Different roots, same soil." As he closed her door, Charles reflected on how eloquently his mathematically minded daughter had described their family. Different roots, same soil. 4 unique saplings and 1 weathered oak, growing stronger together in the garden they now shared. The cemetery was peaceful in the morning light, dew glistening on the grass as Charles parked the car. The girls, now approaching their 9th birthday, sat quietly in the back seat, each holding a small bouquet of wildflowers they had picked from the garden. "Are you ready?" Charles asked gently. 4 solemn nods answered him. Today marked their first visit to their parents' grave since the accident nearly 5 years ago. They moved as a unit through the rows of headstones, Charles slightly behind, allowing them this moment of connection with their past. Eleanor had helped prepare them for the visit, explaining that having a physical place to remember their parents might help complete their healing journey. The matching headstones were simple but elegant, with Michael and Caroline Foster, beloved, parents engraved beneath their names. Emma stepped forward first, placing her flowers carefully. "Hello, Mommy." "Hello, Daddy," she said softly. "We miss you." Her sisters followed, each adding their flowers and whispering their own messages. Charles stood back, his heart full as he watched his daughters acknowledge their roots while standing firmly in their present. After a respectful time at the graves, they spread a blanket beneath a nearby oak tree for a picnic, a celebration of life rather than a mourning of death. "Tell us a story about them," Olivia requested as they ate sandwiches. Charles shared what he had learned about Michael's environmental engineering work and Caroline's passion for teaching kindergarten. The girls added their own fragmented memories, The sound of their father's laugh, the smell of their mother's perfume, a lullaby sung in harmony. They would be so proud of you, Charles told them, and for the first time, all 4 girls seemed to truly believe it. Later that afternoon, they visited Rebecca's memorial garden. The cherry trees had flourished, now strong and tall, creating a canopy of green leaves above the fountain. In spring, they bloomed spectacularly, a riot of pink that transformed the garden into a wonderland. Next year, can we invite our friends for a picnic here during the bloom? Sophia asked. It's so beautiful, it should be shared. Charles smiled at this suggestion. The garden had evolved from a private memorial to a celebrated heart of their home, much as their grief had transformed from an isolating burden to a shared experience that connected rather than divided them. That evening, Charles found the girls in his home office looking through his wedding album. The sight startled him briefly. These were private memories he hadn't shared with them. Is this okay? Emma asked, ever attuned to his reactions. We wanted to see Rebecca. It's perfectly okay, Charles assured them, sitting down to join them. Tell us about her, Emma requested, a question that once would have pierced him with pain but now brought a wave of bittersweet warmth. Rather than deflecting as he once might have, Charles shared stories of Rebecca's compassion and strength, her artistic talent, her way of finding beauty in ordinary moments. She would have loved you all so much, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion behind the words. Ava placed her small hand over his. She still does, she said with that remarkable intuition that continued to astonish him. She sent us to each other. Later, as Charles tucked them in, a ritual they insisted on maintaining even as they grew more independent, Eleanor arrived with a surprise. She carried an envelope containing birth certificates officially listing Charles as their father, the final documentation of their journey from strangers to family. I thought we should mark the occasion, she explained, having become a beloved fixture in their lives, somewhere between aunt and grandmother in the familial constellation they had created together. As the household settled into peaceful sleep, Charles sat on the porch, looking at the stars scattered across the night sky. 4 years had passed since that fateful night at the auction, when broken pieces of 5 different lives had somehow found each other. I kept my promise, Becca, he whispered to the quiet garden. I found a way to love again. 4 ways, actually. Shooting stars streaked across the sky, and for the first time since losing her, Charles felt completely at peace. The grief hadn't disappeared, it had transformed, becoming part of a larger story of healing and growth. Inside his home, 4 little girls slept soundly, their paths forward bright with possibility. Outside, 4 cherry trees stood strong in the garden, their roots deep and secure. Different roots, same soil. The family they had built together wasn't conventional, but it was theirs, assembled from loss and love, strengthened by challenges overcome, and sustained by the remarkable resilience of 4 little girls and the man who had found his heart again through them. Charles Wagner, once a ghost in an expensive suit, was fully alive at last. Father, protector, and custodian of second chances. Full circle.